Every night followed the same quiet rhythm. The apartment settled into silence just after 10. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint glow of a streetlight slipping through the curtains. She would sink into the couch, tired in a way sleep never fully cured, and that's when Milo would pad into the room. Small paws, oversized ears, tail wagging like this moment mattered most. In his mouth was always a sock. Not chewed, not dirty, carefully carried, as if it were something fragile. He would sit in front of her, back straight, eyes shining, and gently place the sock at her feet. Then he'd wait. First she laughed. Puppies did strange things. Maybe it was a game. Maybe it was comfort. She'd praise him, ruffle his fur, toss the sock back toward the laundry basket. Milo would wag once, slow and uncertain, then retreat. But the nights kept coming. And Milo never missed one. Soon the behavior changed. He didn't just bring the sock. He whined softly afterward. Some nights he paced. Others he stared down the hallway, ears stiff, body trembling like he was listening to something she couldn't hear. When she tried to distract him, he resisted. When she stood up, he blocked her path, nudging her leg with his nose, eyes darting toward the bedroom. "Hey, it's okay," she whispered, though her chest felt tight. This wasn't play. This was insistence. That night, when Milo dropped the sock and gently pawed at the dresser drawer, refusing to move away, a cold realization crept in, one she didn't yet have words for. Because whatever her puppy was trying to show her wasn't just a habit. Before we continue, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? The apartment always sounded loudest when nothing was happening. Not loud in noise, but in presence. The low hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen like a held breath. The faint tick of the wall clock carried down the hallway. Outside, a single streetlight buzzed softly, its pale glow slipping through the blinds and painting thin stripes across the living room floor. She sat on the couch with her legs tucked under her, a mug cooling in her hands. Chamomile. Always chamomile at night. The steam had already faded, but she kept holding the cup anyway. The warmth felt grounding, predictable, safe. That was when Milo came in. His paws made almost no sound on the hardwood. He moved with the careful confidence of a puppy who had memorized every corner of the space. Tail swaying gently, ears relaxed, eyes bright with purpose. Something white dangled from his mouth. Sock. He stopped a few feet in front of her. Sat down. Straight-backed. Focused. Like he was presenting something important. Then he placed the sock on the floor. Gently. She smiled despite herself. "Again," she murmured. Her voice sounded softer at night. Everything did. Milo's tail wagged once. Slow. Controlled. He didn't bark. Didn't bounce. He just looked up at her, head slightly tilted, waiting. She leaned forward and picked up the sock. Clean. Folded, almost. One of her own, soft cotton, light gray, stretched just enough to show it had been worn often. "You know this goes in the laundry, right?" she said quietly. Milo blinked. That was all. She stood and dropped it into the basket near the bathroom door. When she turned back, Milo was still sitting in the exact same spot. Watching. Something about that made her pause. "You're such a weird little guy," she said with a faint laugh. He trotted away after a moment, nails clicking softly, disappearing down the hallway toward the bedroom. She didn't think much of it. First. The next night it happened again. Same time. Same quiet. Same soft lighting and cooling tea. Milo patted in with the same calm certainty, a sock held carefully between his teeth. A different sock this time. Same kind. He sat, placed it at her feet, looked up. "Okay," she whispered, amused. "Now you're just stealing laundry." She scratched behind his ears. Milo leaned into her hand, eyes closing briefly, tail giving a small thump against the floor. When she tossed the sock lightly toward the basket, Milo didn't chase it. He stayed beside her. Still. Alert. She noticed it then, the way his ears angled slightly backward. The way his chest moved with slow, measured breaths. Not excited. Not playful. Waiting. "You want a treat?" she asked. His tail moved once. But he didn't go to the kitchen. That was new. The third night, the smile didn't come as easily. Milo entered more slowly this time. His steps were careful. thoughtful. The sock in his mouth looked heavier somehow, like it carried weight beyond fabric. He stopped closer than before. Didn't sit right away. Instead, he stood there staring at her, eyes dark and searching. Then he lowered his head and placed the sock down closer than the nights before, almost touching her foot. She felt a small tightening in her chest. "Hey," she said softly. "What's going on with you?" Milo's tail didn't wag. He let out a quiet sound. Not a whine exactly. More like a breath pushed through his throat. Uncertain. Asking. She reached for him and he leaned in, but only for a second. Then he stepped back. Looked toward the hallway. Looked back at her. Again. The room felt different suddenly. Like the air had shifted. She followed his gaze down the dark hallway leading to the bedroom. The door was open. The dresser barely visible in the shadows. "Buddy, it's late," she said, trying to keep her voice light. "Everything's fine." Milo didn't move. He stood there, body angled toward the hallway, ears lifting now. His posture wasn't tense, just focused, like he was listening to something beyond sound. She stood slowly. The hardwood creaked under her weight. Milo flinched, not in fear but in attention. He stepped closer to her leg, pressing his side against her calf. Protective. Her stomach fluttered. She laughed quietly, trying to shake it off. "You're acting like something's wrong." Milo looked up at her, held her gaze. Then he nudged the sock with his nose. Once. Deliberate. That night, when she finally went to bed, she lay awake longer than usual. Milo curled up beside the bed instead of at the foot, his body angled toward her, one paw stretched out like it needed to touch her to rest. She listened to his breathing in the dark. Slow. Steady. But beneath it she sensed something else. A watchfulness. And though she couldn't explain why, one thought lingered long after the apartment fell completely silent. This wasn't play. This was something being offered. Again and again. And whatever her puppy was trying to show her, she wasn't ready for it yet. Morning arrived gently. Light crept through the blinds in pale ribbons, stretching across the bedroom wall. Somewhere outside, a car door closed. A bird called once, then again. The city easing itself awake. She lay still for a moment, eyes open, listening. Milo was already awake. She could feel it without looking, the quiet awareness in the room, the subtle shift of weight near the bed. When she turned her head, she saw him sitting on the floor beside her, posture straight, ears slightly forward, watching her. "Good morning," she whispered. His tail tapped the floor once. Soft. Careful. She reached down and brushed her fingers along his head. His fur was warm from sleep, impossibly soft. He leaned into her hand, then pulled back, gaze flicking toward the bedroom door. There it was again. That look. "What?" she murmured, still half asleep. Milo stood and walked a few steps toward the hallway. Stopped. Looked back at her. His tail didn't wag this time. It stayed low, relaxed but purposeful. She sat up. The room felt normal. No strange sounds. No shadows where they shouldn't be. The dresser stood where it always had, drawers closed, clothes folded inside. "Okay," she said softly, mostly to herself. "I'm getting up." Milo waited until her feet touched the floor. Only then did he move. The rest of the day passed without incident. Work emails. Coffee that tasted faintly burnt. A grocery run where Milo trotted beside her, nose low, taking in the world with delighted seriousness. He was his usual self, curious, friendly, gentle with strangers. Normal. By evening she had almost convinced herself the sock thing was just a phase. Puppies did weird things. She cooked dinner while Milo lay near the kitchen doorway, chin resting on his paws. He watched her hands as she chopped vegetables, eyes following every movement. Occasionally his ears twitched at sounds she didn't notice. The elevator down the hall, footsteps on the stairs outside. Instinct. She'd read about that. Dogs noticing things before humans did. But this felt different. After dinner, the apartment settled back into its familiar quiet. Dishes drying in the rack. The soft glow of lamps replacing overhead light. The couch reclaiming its shape as she sank into it, exhaustion seeping into her bones. Milo disappeared down the hallway. She expected him to come back empty-mouthed. He didn't. Instead, she heard the faint sound of fabric shifting, a drawer opening just enough to sigh. then closing. Her brow furrowed. "Milo," she called gently. Paws approached. Slow. Deliberate. He emerged carrying a sock. Her breath caught just slightly. It was the same one as the night before. He stopped in front of her. Saturday. Placed it down with care. Then he didn't look at her. He looked past her. Toward the bedroom. Her pulse quickened, though she didn't know why. "Hey," she said, trying to smile. "You're really committed to this, huh?" Milo's ears flicked backward. He let out a soft whine. It was barely audible. More vibration than sound. The kind that seemed to come from deep in his chest. She leaned forward. "What is it?" He stood and nudged the sock toward her. Then turned and walked a few steps down the hallway. Stopped. Looked back. The movement was so clear. So intentional. Her stomach tightened. "Milo, come here." He didn't. He just stood there, gaze steady, tail still. Waiting. She stood slowly, heart beating a little faster now. The floor creaked beneath her feet. Milo glanced at the sound, then back to her, as if checking she was still following. They reached the bedroom doorway together. The room was dimmer than the living room. Shadows gathered in the corners. The dresser stood against the wall, silent and unremarkable. Milo walked straight to it. He sniffed the bottom drawer. Saturday. Looked up at her. Then pawed at the wood. Once. A gentle tap. Her breath felt shallow now. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Milo leaned back slightly and pawed again. Tap. Tap. Her hand hovered near the drawer handle. She didn't touch it. Not yet. A wave of discomfort washed over her, irrational, sudden. The kind that made your skin prickle without reason. She stepped back. "No," she said quietly. "It's nothing." Milo turned his head toward her, ears lifting. He didn't move from the drawer. His eyes searched her face, reading something she wasn't saying. Then he stood and walked back to her. Pressed his body gently against her legs. Grounding her. His head rested against her knee. The whine came again. Soft. Insistent. "I'm okay," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "See? I'm fine." Milo didn't respond. He just stayed there, breathing slow and steady, as if lending her his calm. That night, the sock stayed on the bedroom floor. Neither of them moved it. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Milo curled beside her, his back pressed firmly against her thigh. Every so often he shifted, repositioning himself closer, as if to make sure she was still there. Still breathing. Still okay. Her thoughts drifted in uncomfortable directions. Memories she didn't like to touch. Feelings she kept tucked away and labeled later. She swallowed hard. In the darkness, Milo lifted his head. Listened. Waited. Then rested his chin back down, eyes still open. Guarding. And for the first time since the sock ritual began, she understood something she hadn't wanted to admit. Milo wasn't bringing her socks. He was bringing her reminders. And whatever he sensed in that drawer. It wasn't over yet. The next few days passed in careful denial. She went to work. Answered emails. Took Milo on his usual morning walks, letting him stop and sniff every tree and lamppost like the world was brand new each time. She laughed when he tugged gently toward squirrels. She told herself over and over that everything was normal, and for the most part it was. Milo ate well, slept well, played with the same clumsy joy he always had. If someone had met him on the street, they would have seen nothing unusual at all, except at night. That's when the pattern returned. Always after the lights were dimmed. Always after the apartment grew quiet. Milo would disappear down the hallway and come back carrying a sock. Sometimes gray. Sometimes blue. Always clean. Always folded in that strange, careful way, as if he'd learned that roughness wasn't allowed. He never chewed them. Never shook them like toys. He carried them like offerings. She tried to interrupt the routine. One night she closed the bedroom door. Another night, she put the laundry basket inside the closet and shut it tight. She even switched drawers, moved socks to a different place, thinking maybe it would confuse him. It didn't. Milo found them anyway. Each time he repeated the same sequence. Enter quietly. Sit in front of her. Place the sock down. Wait. She started laughing it off again. Forced at first. Then louder, like humor could smooth over the unease curling in her chest. "You're obsessed," she told him one evening, shaking her head. You know that, right? Milo's ears flicked. He didn't look away. She tried treats, praise, redirecting him with toys. But whenever she tossed a ball or squeaked his favorite rubber duck, his attention returned again and again to the sock on the floor. And then to the hallway. Her reactions grew sharper. Hey, she said one night a little too quickly. Enough. Milo froze. Not in fear. In confusion. His tail lowered slightly. His ears softened. He stepped back, watching her closely, as if trying to understand what he'd done wrong. Guilt prickled at her skin. I didn't mean it like that, she sighed, kneeling down. You're okay. I'm just tired. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his warm fur. Milo relaxed instantly, leaning into her, his body molding to hers like it belonged there. But even as she held him, she felt it. That tug. That quiet insistence. He wasn't anxious. He wasn't misbehaving. He was waiting for something she wasn't giving. Late one night, she stood in the kitchen rinsing a mug, staring at nothing as water rushed over porcelain. Milo sat at the threshold, watching her. You're acting like I'm missing something, she muttered. Milo tilted his head. She turned off the faucet. The silence rushed back in, heavier than before. Look, she said, squatting down to his level. I don't know what you want me to do. Milo stood, walked past her, down the hallway. She didn't follow. Instead, she leaned back against the counter, heart beating too fast for such a quiet moment. Her gaze drifted toward the bedroom, then away again. She knew what he wanted, or at least she suspected. And that was the problem. Opening that drawer meant opening memories she had packed away with care. Folded neatly, labeled handled, locked behind routine and distraction. She had survived those moments once. She wasn't eager to invite them back in, so she misread Milo on purpose. She told herself he was bored, or attached, or confused. She told herself dogs didn't understand emotional history. That night, Milo didn't bring a sock. Instead, he stood in the hallway, silent. She noticed him only after several minutes had passed. He hadn't moved. His body was angled toward the bedroom, but his head was turned just enough to watch her from the corner of his eye. Milo, she called softly. He didn't come. She swallowed. I'm coming to bed, she said, like an announcement would fix things. She stood, walking past him into the bedroom. Milo followed closely, almost brushing against her legs, staying so near she could feel the warmth of him through her clothes. When she sat on the edge of the bed, Milo didn't lie down. He stood in front of the dresser, still, waiting. Her chest tightened. She lay back quickly, turning away, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Tomorrow, she whispered. Okay, we'll deal with it tomorrow. Milo stayed where he was for a long time. She could hear his breathing. Slow, controlled, patient. Eventually, he climbed onto the bed and curled against her back, placing one paw gently on her hip. The pressure was light but deliberate, as if anchoring her there. She closed her eyes. Sleep came late, and when it did, it brought dreams she hadn't had in years. Half-remembered moments. Soft cotton. The smell of laundry soap. A time when socks had been folded by hands that no longer existed. She woke before dawn, heart racing, Milo already awake beside her, watching. She exhaled shakily. In the gray light of early morning, the truth felt closer than ever. Milo wasn't confused. He wasn't obsessed. He was patient. And she was the one refusing to listen. By the fourth night, denial no longer worked. It didn't matter how busy the day had been, or how tired she felt, or how carefully she avoided thinking about the bedroom. The pattern waited for her. It always did. That evening, rain pressed softly against the windows, a steady rhythm that blurred the city lights outside. The apartment felt smaller somehow, wrapped in the sound of water and the smell of damp pavement drifting in through a cracked window. She sat on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders, scrolling mindlessly on her phone. Milo lay nearby, chin on his paws, eyes half closed. Calm. For a while. Then his ears lifted. Just slightly. She didn't notice at first. She was too focused on the screen, too focused on not thinking. Milo's head came up. His body tensed, not sharply, not in alarm, but in attention. He stood, walked toward the hallway. She glanced up. "Where are you going?" He didn't answer, of course, but he didn't rush either. His steps were slow, measured, like he was counting them. She listened as a drawer slid open. Not all the way. Just enough. Her breath caught. "Milo," she called, her voice tighter now. He returned carrying a sock. But something was different. He didn't come straight to her. Instead, he stopped halfway across the living room, looked at her, then deliberately turned back toward the hallway. Paused. Looked again. It was no longer an offering. It was an invitation. Her phone slipped from her hand and landed softly on the couch cushion. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. I see you." Milo waited. She stood, the blanket sliding from her shoulders to the floor. The rain outside grew louder, drumming against the glass, as if urging her forward. They walked together down the hallway. This time Milo didn't stop at the doorway. He went straight to the dresser. Saturday. Placed the sock carefully at the base of the bottom drawer. Then he did something new. He lay down, directly in front of it, blocking it with his body. Her throat tightened. "You're really serious about this," she murmured. Milo looked up at her, eyes steady, calm, unwavering. His tail rested still against the floor. No wagging. No nerves. Confidence. Trust. She crouched slowly, knees protesting as she lowered herself. Milo didn't move away. He simply shifted slightly, making room for her hand as it hovered over the drawer handle. Her fingers trembled. "I don't know what you think is in here," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Milo exhaled. A long, steady breath. She noticed then how relaxed he was. How sure. Whatever this was, he wasn't afraid of it. She pulled her hand back. "Not yet." Milo's ears flicked. He lifted his head and gently nudged the sock toward her again. Then he stood and pressed his nose to the drawer. Once. Twice. No pawing this time. No whining. Just presence. She stood abruptly, stepping back. "I can't," she said, her voice cracking. "I can't do this right now." Milo didn't follow. He stayed where he was, guarding the drawer. The rest of the night passed in uneasy fragments. She cooked without appetite. The food went cold on the plate. Milo barely touched his bowl, eating just enough before returning to the hallway, watching. When she finally went to bed, she left the bedroom door open. Milo didn't climb onto the mattress. He lay on the floor between the bed and the dresser, body stretched across the space like a living boundary. She stared at the ceiling, rain tapping steadily, her chest aching with something that felt like grief but didn't yet have a name. Sometime after midnight, she heard it. A soft sound. Not from the drawer. From Milo. A low whine escaped his throat, barely louder than a breath. She turned her head toward him. "Milo," she whispered. His tail thumped once against the floor. Then again. Slow. Encouraging. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and sat there for a long moment, hands gripping the edge of the mattress. Milo lifted his head, eyes following her every movement. She reached down and rested her hand on his back. Warm. Solid. Real. "Whatever this is," she said quietly, "you're not letting it go, are you?" Milo didn't move. He just stayed. And in that stillness she finally understood. This wasn't about socks. It was about consistency. About repetition. About a truth that returned night after night because it hadn't been acknowledged. Patterns didn't lie. Dogs didn't insist without reason. And whatever waited inside that drawer had waited long enough. Her hand drifted toward the handle again. This time, she didn't pull away. Her fingers closed around the handle. Cold metal. Smooth from years of use. She paused there, breathing shallowly, listening to the rain slide down the window and the quiet, steady presence of Milo beside her. His body was angled toward the drawer now, but his head was turned toward her, eyes soft. No pressure. Just readiness. She pulled. The drawer opened with a familiar sound. A low wooden glide, a faint scrape where it always caught on the left side. The smell rose first. Clean cotton. Lavender detergent. Something older beneath it. Memories had since. She'd forgotten that. Inside, everything was folded with care. Shirts stacked neatly. A scarf tucked along the side. And on top, just where her hands had always left it, was a small pile of socks. Not hers. Her breath hitched. They were thicker than the ones Milo usually brought out. Worn soft with time. One pair mismatched slightly, the heel darker on one sock than the other. She recognized them instantly. In that way recognition doesn't ask permission. Her chest tightened. "Oh," she whispered. Milo shifted closer. Not crowding. Not touching. Just there. She reached in and picked one up. The fabric felt heavier than it should have. Warmer. Like it held heat that hadn't fully faded yet. Her throat burned. She hadn't opened this drawer in months. Not since she'd reorganized the apartment after everything. She'd told herself it was practical. A way to make space. A way to move forward. She hadn't thrown anything away. She just put it somewhere quiet. Her knees gave out slowly, and she sat on the floor, the drawer still open in front of her. The sock rested in her hands, fingers pressing into the familiar stretch of cotton. Milo sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. She hadn't planned to cry, but her eyes blurred anyway. "I forgot," she said softly. "I didn't mean to. I just..." Her voice broke. The socks had belonged to her father. He used to leave them everywhere. By the couch. By the door. Half tucked under the bed. She used to complain about it, laughing as she gathered them up and folded them, scolding him for never matching pairs. He'd smile and promise to do better. He never did. When he got sick, the socks stayed folded. Clean. Waiting. When he passed, she couldn't bring herself to get rid of them, so she hid them. Milo leaned forward and sniffed the open drawer, his nose hovering just above the fabric. His ears relaxed. His tail gave a slow, gentle wag. This was it. This was what he'd been sensing. The grief she had packed away so neatly it almost convinced her it was gone. She pressed the sock to her chest. Her shoulders shook. Milo rested his head against her arm, the weight of it grounding steady. His breathing stayed slow, even as hers fractured into quiet sobs. "I didn't know how to hold it," she whispered. "I didn't know where to put it." Milo didn't respond. He didn't need to. He stayed with her as the minutes passed. As the rain softened. As the ache in her chest moved from sharp to dull, settling into something that hurt but no longer threatened to spill her apart. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and let out a shaky laugh. "You brought them back to me," she said. "Every night." Milo lifted his head and looked at her. His eyes were calm. Certain. She reached out and hugged him, burying her face in his fur. He leaned into it fully now, tail thumping once against the floor. The drawer stayed open. She didn't close it. Not yet. For the first time since she'd hidden those socks away, she didn't feel the urge to. Milo had found what she couldn't. And in doing so, he had brought her back to it. She didn't know how long she sat there. Time moved differently on the floor beside the open drawer. The rain outside faded to a soft hush, the city settling into its late-night quiet. The apartment lights stayed low, casting warm shadows that felt less threatening now. Milo never left her side. When her breathing hitched again, he adjusted, pressing closer, shifting his weight so his shoulder rested firmly against her ribs. Not heavy, just enough to remind her she wasn't floating away. She noticed the details then. The way his ears relaxed fully, no longer angled toward the hallway. The slow rhythm of his tail against the floor. The steady rise and fall of his chest, as if he were setting the pace for her to follow. She inhaled, then exhaled. Again. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure why the words came out. Gratitude didn't feel big enough for what he was doing, for what he had done. Milo blinked slowly. She reached back into the drawer and lifted the rest of the socks out, placing them gently on her lap. She didn't rush. Each pair came out one at a time, folded with care, the way she'd always done it before. Before hospitals. Before phone calls. Before the quiet that followed. Her father's voice surfaced unexpectedly. Not loud, not clear, just a memory of cadence. The way he used to hum when he folded laundry. Ufki. Unbothered by it. Her chest tightened again, but this time she didn't fight it. She let the feeling move through her. Milo shifted, laying his head across her thigh now, eyes half closed. His paw rested against her knee, a gentle weight that anchored her in the present. "I thought if I didn't look," she said quietly, "it wouldn't hurt." The words sounded truer spoken aloud. But it does, she continued. It just waits. Milo's tail thumped once. Agreement. She laughed softly through the tears. You already knew that, didn't you? He lifted his head and looked at her, eyes warm and unjudging. Dogs didn't ask why you avoided pain. They only noticed that you did. She folded the socks again, hands steadier now. When she finished, she placed them back into the drawer, but not the way they'd been before. She moved them to the front. Visible. Acknowledged. Then she sat there, drawer still open, Milo still pressed against her, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not relief. Not yet. But space. The kind that came after holding your breath too long. Eventually, her legs grew stiff and numb. She tried to stand, wobbling slightly. Milo was on his feet instantly, body close, ready to support her if she needed it. I'm okay, she said softly. He stayed near anyway. They moved to the couch together. She pulled the blanket back over her shoulders, Milo hopping up beside her, curling against her side. His head rested beneath her chin, the familiar weight a comfort she hadn't realized she needed this badly. The apartment felt different now. Not lighter, but honest. She stared at the far wall, eyes unfocused, letting memories surface at their own pace. Not all of them were painful. Some made her smile faintly. Some brought a quiet ache that didn't demand to be pushed away. Milo breathed steadily. Every so often he shifted his head or stretched a paw, checking in without making a fuss. His instincts had done their work. Now he was simply present. After a while she reached for her phone. Not to scroll. To text her sister. Found Dad's socks tonight, she typed. I think I'm finally ready to talk about him. She hesitated before sending it. Then pressed send. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. I'm here, the reply read. Anytime. She closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. Milo lifted his head at the sound, then settled again when he saw she was calm. His tail flicked once, content. Later, when she stood to get ready for bed, Milo followed. But he didn't go to the dresser. He went straight to the bed. Waited. She paused, looking back at the open drawer across the room. The socks were still there, visible in the lamplight. Not hidden. Not ignored. I'll see you in the morning, she whispered to the room. Then she turned off the light. That night she slept deeply. No dreams. No half-remembered scenes. Just rest. Milo slept stretched along her side, one paw draped over her leg, his body warm and solid. When she shifted, he adjusted without waking fully, maintaining contact like it mattered. And maybe it did. Because healing didn't arrive as a sudden moment. It came as quiet companionship, as permission to feel, as a small dog who noticed what hurt, and refused to let it stay buried. For the first time in a long while, she woke without the familiar tightness in her chest. And Milo was already awake, watching her. Calm. Certain. The nights changed first. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just differently. The next evening after dinner, Milo didn't disappear down the hallway. He stayed in the living room, stretched out near the couch, eyes half closed as if the weight he'd been carrying had finally been set down. She noticed right away. Her body had learned to anticipate his movements, the quiet patting of paws, the soft sound of a drawer opening. When those sounds didn't come, she felt a small pause inside herself. Not panic. Curiosity. She glanced toward the hallway. The bedroom door was open. The dresser visible in the dim light. The drawer still closed now, but not sealed away in her mind like it had been before. Milo shifted, lifting his head. Their eyes met. He didn't move. She smiled. Looks like you're off duty tonight, she said softly. Milo's tail thumped once against the floor. Content. They went to bed without ceremony. No sock. No signals. Just the quiet routine of brushing teeth, turning off lights, pulling the covers up. Milo curled at the foot of the bed, sighing as he settled, his body loose and relaxed. The tension she hadn't realized he'd been holding was gone. She lay awake for a while, listening to the familiar sounds of the apartment. But this time they didn't feel heavy. They felt lived in. The following days brought small shifts. She opened the drawer in the morning sunlight once just to look. The socks sat neatly inside, no longer hidden. She didn't touch them that day. She didn't need to. Another night, She took one pair out and placed them in a small fabric box on her dresser. A place of honor, not secrecy. The motion felt gentle, intentional. Milo watched from the doorway. His ears flicked forward, then relaxed. Approval. On their walks he stayed closer to her side now. Not anxious, just companionable. Occasionally, he looked up at her as if checking in, his gaze warm and steady. She found herself talking to him more. Not in the way people talk to dogs. In the way people talked when they were finally ready to say things out loud. "I miss him," she said one afternoon as they stood waiting for the crosswalk signal. "I still expect him to call." Milo leaned against her leg, offering his weight without looking up. "I think he would have liked you," she added. His tail wagged then. Easy. Confident. That night she dreamed again. But this time the dream didn't jolt her awake. It lingered softly like a memory she could sit with. Her father's laughter. The sound of a washing machine in the background. The faint smell of detergent and warm cotton. She woke with tears in her eyes. But she didn't feel broken. Milo noticed immediately. He climbed up beside her, resting his chin on her shoulder, breathing slow and steady. She stroked his fur, feeling gratitude swell quietly in her chest. "Thank you for not letting me hide," she whispered. Milo didn't move. Healing didn't mean the pain disappeared. It meant it softened. It meant the ache no longer demanded silence. The drawer became part of the room again. Not a trigger. Not a secret. Just a place that held something meaningful. And Milo? He returned to being a puppy. Playful. Curious. A little clumsy. But sometimes, especially at night, he would glance toward the dresser, then back at her, as if checking that everything was still okay. And every time she would nod. "Yes," she'd say quietly. "I'm okay." He always seemed to believe her. 'Cause now it was true. The sock never came back. Weeks passed, and Milo never once returned to the drawer. The ritual had ended without ceremony, like something that had simply completed its work. Life settled into a new rhythm. Morning light filtered through the windows. Coffee brewed. Shoes waited by the door. Milo grew a little taller, a little steadier, his paws less clumsy as the weeks moved on. He learned new commands, new routes on their walks, new ways to curl himself into the small spaces beside her. But some things stayed the same. Every night, before bed, she paused by the dresser. Sometimes she opened the drawer. Sometimes she didn't. Either way, she acknowledged it. And that mattered. One evening, as autumn edged quietly into the city, she sat on the floor folding laundry. A familiar smell filled the room, warm cotton, detergent, clean air. She smiled faintly as she matched socks, lining them up with care. Milo lay nearby, chewing gently on a rubber toy. When she finished, she reached for the fabric box on the dresser and added a freshly washed pair of her father's socks to it. Not hidden. Not untouched. Just present. Milo lifted his head, watched, then set his toy down and walked over, sitting beside her. Close. Not urgent. Just there. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think love was about holding on." Milo leaned into her leg. "But I think it's also about noticing," she continued. "About knowing when something needs to be brought back into the light." Milo sighed and rested his head on her knee. Dogs didn't understand words the way humans did. But they understood weight. And scent. And silence. They understood when something was carried too long. That night, she dreamed of her father again. He stood in the doorway of her childhood home, smiling, socks mismatched as always. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. She woke with a calm she hadn't felt in years. Milo was already awake, curled beside her, one paw resting against her arm. When she stirred, his tail moved once, slow and gentle. "Good morning," she whispered. He blinked. Content. They went for a walk just after sunrise. The air was cool. Leaves scattered across the sidewalk, crunching softly beneath their steps. Milo sniffed every corner like the world was still full of discoveries. At one point he stopped and looked back at her. She smiled. "I'm here," she said. He waited until she caught up, then continued on. That was the thing about dogs. They didn't drag you forward. They didn't leave you behind. They walked with you. People often said dogs sensed danger. But that wasn't the whole truth. They sensed what hurt. What lingered? What needed tending? Milo had brought her socks because he could smell what she couldn't face yet. He had noticed the pause in her breathing near the dresser, the way her body changed when she passed it, the sadness that settled quietly in the room at night. He didn't judge it. He didn't rush it. He simply carried it to her, again and again until she was ready. Back home, she unclipped Milo's leash and watched him trot inside, tail wagging as he went to his water bowl. The apartment felt warm. Lived in. Honest. She paused by the dresser one last time that morning, opened the drawer, looked inside, then closed it gently. Thank you, she said, not just to Milo but to the moment, to the pain that had taught her something, to the love that had never really left. Milo looked up at her from across the room, ears relaxed, eyes bright. The bond between them felt different now, deeper, not because of what had been revealed, but because of how it had been honored. Dogs didn't come into our lives to fix us. They came to sit beside us while we fixed ourselves. And sometimes, they carried the truth in their mouths until we were strong enough to take it back.